Yeah, Nitish, second, I think you can start now.
Okay. So we'll start again with electrostatics. We'll start with the basics. Take a look at all the basic parameters that we have to see. We'll look at some of the concepts. Okay. So the very basic parameter which we have in electrostatics is an electric charge. Now, electric charge is nothing else, but this is a fundamental unit in electrostatics. Okay. And this electric charge will define all the properties that are related to electricity, that are related to magnetism, which are possessed by any material. So needless to say, the study of electric charge is one of the most basic concepts, one of the most important concepts, and one which will help you understand other related concepts very well. So let's see what is electric charge, how it was discovered. Now in very earlier times, there might have been some person who just saw that when two objects are rubbed with each other, one of the objects acquired the property of attracting other objects. That discovery in itself led to the discovery of electric charge. So it's important to understand here, the electric charge, as we know, consists of protons, electrons, and other charged particles. But at that point of time, there was no concept of electrons or protons. All that someone observed was that when two objects are made in contact with each other, they are rubbed against each other, there is something happening which causes one of the substances to get some additional, right? So this was the basic understanding of electric charge. Okay. Now, there were lots of studies were conducted, and thereafter it was established there are two kinds of entities which constitute electric charge: the positive entities and the negative entities. Okay. So the positive entities which we now know are the protons, the negative entities we now know are electrons. So also a device was required. Once people understood that there is some charge on a body, they wanted to understand how much charge is there on a body. Because we always want to compare things. We always want to know how much of a property does a material possess. So the apparatus that is used for measuring the amount of electric charge was called as gold-leaf electroscope. A gold-leaf electroscope is a very simple apparatus. You will have a long rod which is open at one end, and at the other end there are two gold leaves. The entire apparatus is nothing else but a single rod and two gold leaves which are placed in an insulated environment. So whenever there was an object, let's say there is a rod A, and you want to know how much electric charge it possesses, we will simply bring this rod and touch it or keep it in contact with the top of the other rod which we have in the electroscope apparatus. Right? Now you can see whenever the object will touch the top of the rod, if there are some charges, it will affect the gold leaf apparatus also. So that charge will get transferred from the rod to the two gold leaves attached at the bottom. And we know that when two substances are there which have the same charge, they will repel each other. And if they have opposite charges, they will attract each other. And since the two gold leaves are now charged with same polarity, they will start diverging away from each other. It can be observed that the more the amount of charge in the object of our interest, the more will be the divergence of the two gold leaves. So this apparatus just gave an indication of how much charge is there on a certain body. Now it's important to understand that the gold-leaf electroscope was a very basic apparatus. It never gave any magnitude of the charge. All it could give was a relative comparison between two charged objects. Okay? So this is just the basic understanding of what is an electric charge, how it was discovered, and how was it being measured earlier. Now right now it might seem very rudimentary thing to you that someone wanted to measure how much charge is there on a body and is it more or less compared to any other object. Okay? But it's important to understand, we should take a note here, that this gold-leaf apparatus was actually the basic device based on which all the current electric charge measuring devices are based upon. The divergence of two gold leaves dependent upon the charge present on an object makes up the basic concept of almost all the current measuring devices. Okay. Now we have discovered what is electric charge. We see that charge is moving. If there is an electric charge, it can either stay stationary or it can move. Now if it stays stationary, then that's it. But once it starts moving, it will come across different substances through which it will move. Now, all those substances were further classified into two parts. Those substances which allowed electric charge to pass through them or travel through them, they were classified as conductors. And all those substances which did not allow the charge to pass through them, they were considered to be insulators. Now, conductors and insulators play a very important role in designing, manufacturing, and use of different kinds of electrical apparatus.
There are currently 2 other participants in the conference.
Classified as conductors, while there are some objects classified as insulators. Okay, that is a discussion that we will have later on. But for now, let me just tell you that suppose if you want to make up a device which will drive some machine. So for that purpose, you will have to make sure the charges are being transferred. So for transferring the charge, you will need a substance which is a conductor. But you also do not want the charges to leak from the apparatus. You will need some insulating material. So that is where the usefulness of conductors and insulators come into picture. Right? Now, from the concepts of conductors and insulators, another concept was derived, which is the concept of earthing or grounding. Now, we all know, we have seen in our homes that whenever you use electric plug, there are 3 ports. One of the ports is called the earth port. Okay. Now, it's always advised to us that we should always have proper earthing. I think now it's time for all of you to understand what is the proper earthing means. Okay. As a property of electric charge, all the charges will try to move from higher potential to lower potential. Let's not deep dive and see what potential is. Just understand that all the charges will try to move from higher potential to lower potential. Now, Earth is at a very low potential. So whenever we connect any electrical apparatus to the Earth, then all the charges will start flowing towards the Earth. So any charge which is leaking out from any apparatus will be driven towards Earth and will not affect anything else in its surroundings. So that is a safety precaution which is usually taken while operating any electrical apparatus. And this process of sharing charges with Earth is called the process of earthing or grounding. Right? So, we have just seen what is conductor, what are insulators, what is grounding. Now we'll try to understand how can an object be charged. Okay. Now, when electric charge was discovered, it was found by rubbing 2 objects with each other. Now, when 2 objects are rubbed against each other, one of the objects suddenly acquired a property to attract other objects. So it was concluded that something must have been transferred from one object to the other object, which allowed it to attract other objects. Okay? So that process was called, at that point of time, that was the only process that was that people knew how to charge an object. But they did not know what was actually happening. Now we know that when we rub 2 objects together, some electrons from one of the objects are transferred to the other object, and the object which gives an electron becomes positively charged. And the other object which acquires some electrons becomes negatively charged. A negatively charged object will always attract any other object which has got some positive charge. Okay? Now, after this concept was discovered, people also came to see that if, let's suppose you take a glass rod, you rub it with silk cloth. So the glass rod now will lose some electrons to the silk. Okay? So the glass rod will become positively charged. Now that positively charged glass rod will attract tiny bits of paper. This is something which you might have all done in your childhood. You would have rubbed the ruler against your hair and tried to attract some pieces of paper. Let me explain to you what actually happens there. When you rub a glass rod with silk cloth, some electrons are transferred from the glass rod to the silk cloth. The glass rod becomes negatively charged. Now, when you bring the negatively charged glass rod near any bits of paper, the paper itself consists of atoms. Atoms consist of electrons and protons. The protons which are positively charged, they will be attracted by the negatively charged electrons. Right? Now, because of this, the glass rod is able to attract tiny bits of paper towards it. Now, you might have a question, that since electrons and protons are present in every object, why not electrons of one object attract the protons of other objects all the time? Okay? For that, you have to understand the concept of equilibrium. In very layman term, let me just tell you that whenever there is an atom, there are a number of electrons, the number of protons, they are equal under stable conditions. So all those charges cancel out each other. And on the whole, the object has got no charge. That is why two objects which have balanced number of electrons and protons, they will never attract or repel each other. They will stay as if they are neutral. Okay? And in terms of electric charges, an object can be defined as positively charged, negatively charged, or neutral based on the number of protons and electrons in it. You can understand it in this way: if an object has more number of protons than electrons, then it is positively charged. If an object has more number of electrons than protons, it is negatively charged. And if it has got both equal number of electrons as the number of protons, then the object is neutral. Right? So that was the initial conditions which were observed in terms of electric charge, how objects are being charged, and what is the measure of charge. Right? The next thing which was discovered was that if there is a charged object and it is not in very close surroundings with any other object which is not charged, the other object also acquires some charge. This process is called charging by induction. Okay. Now, I cannot show you any diagrams. Let me just tell you and try to imagine this in your head. Let's suppose we have got two spheres. Okay. Those two spheres are completely neutral. They are equal number of electrons, equal number of protons. If you bring a negatively charged electron in the vicinity of one of the spheres, what is expected to happen? The negatively charged glass rod is supposed to attract the positive protons present inside that sphere. So if you keep it there long enough, some of the protons might come to one side of the sphere which is in closer contact with the glass rod. So there will be a redistribution of charge within that sphere. Because of that, a part of sphere will have more number of positive charges and another part of sphere will have more number of negative charges. Right? So in a way, without even touching this sphere with anything, without moving any charges out of it or adding any charges to it, we have created positive and negative charge on the sphere. This process is called as charging by induction. Alright? So, we have just seen that charges can be transferred from one object to the another, and a charge, positive or negative, can be induced in the other object by just bringing a charged object in contact with them or in vicinity with the uncharged object. Right? Now, let's have a look at all the different properties of the electric charge. Because electric charge is something which we will be talking about all the time, so we need to understand how this electric charge actually behaves. The first property which we have is additivity. Now, understand electric charge as something like we will measure time. If you are measuring time, if you are given two instances of time, if you want to know what is the total time, you will just add them. Same is the condition with electric charge. Just that time is not a physical quantity. Okay, it's intangible. However, electric charge, it is a physical quantity. It is present. And whenever we have been given two or more than two charges, if ever you want to find out what is the total number of charges, you simply go ahead and add them. Okay. While adding charges, it's important to understand whether the charge is positive or negative. Right? If you have, let's say you have got four charges. One is Q1, that is Q2, then Q3, then Q4. If you want to find out what is the total amount of charge, you just add them together. Q1 plus Q2 plus Q3 plus Q4. Okay. The only thing which you have to pay attention to is whether Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 are positive or negative. Where if it is positive, it will be kept there with a positive sign. If it is negative, it will be kept with a negative sign. The rest will remain the same. The basic rule of mathematics will apply. The negatives will be added together, positives will be added together, and we will find the difference, and whichever is greater, we will put the same sign before them. So if an object has, okay, we will deal with examples later on. The next is the property of conservation of charge. The property of conservation of charge states that charge can neither be created nor be destroyed. Now, in our earlier examples, when we talked about charges being transferred from one object to the another, we were not talking about new charges being created. We were saying that the number of charges remains the same. Because if we take both the objects together, then one object has lost some charge, the other object has gained the equal amount of charge. So in total, the total amount of charge present on both the objects together remains the same. Okay. Now, to understand the properties of conservation, we have to understand some basic terms, like an insulated system. What is an insulated system? When we say insulated, it means it is unaffected anything which is happening outside it. If I say that a silk cloth and a glass rod is now my insulated system, we are only talking about whatever is happening between the silk rod and the silk cloth and the glass rod. There might be several other charges present outside this, but we are not interested in that. Some charges were transferred from the glass rod to the silk rod, from the glass rod to the silk cloth. But when we take the total number of charges, we count the charges present on the glass rod as well as on the silk rod, glass rod and silk cloth. So there we can apply the property of conservation of charge, and we can just say that charges are neither created nor destroyed. They can only be transferred from one object to the other. Right? Now, the next property of charges is quantization. What quantization means is that charges are quantified. It means they are quantifiable. Quantifiable means that we can assign a certain quantity to it. Just say we say that the distance it will be measured in meters, and if we say that 1 meter is the basic unit of distance, then we will define everything in terms of multiples of 1 meter. If there is 200 meters, we will say it is 200 times that 1 meter. Similarly, in terms of charge, we define it in terms of E. E is equal to, its value is equal to 1.602 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulombs. Okay. Now, coulombs is the unit of charge. However, 1 coulomb is not the minimum amount of charge which is present. The minimum amount of charge that has been observed, it is E, which is equal to 1.602 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulombs. So whatever charges we observe around us, all that will be in terms of multiples of E. So you can see that if the total charge present on any object is equal to Q, then Q will be equal to N into E, where N will be N into J. Okay, and E will be 1.602 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulombs. So this is called as quantization of charge, right? Okay. Now, till now, all that we have covered are the basic concepts, the basic parameters, the basic properties of electric charges. Now, from here on, whatever we are discussing, they will constitute of all the things that we study about charges, all the things that come out of our understanding of the charge. Okay, we will have different laws, we will have different fields, forces, we will have discuss about flux, we will talk about different laws which will help us understand how a charge is present in nature and how a charge travels around us. Okay. Now, the very first law, the very basic law in electrostatics is Coulomb's law. This Coulomb's law is very similar to what you had studied for gravitation. Just that Coulomb's law is applicable for two or more than two charges. Now, in its basic form, Coulomb's law states that the force between 2 point charges varies inversely as the square of distance decreases. Okay. Now, the first line is very easy to observe in nature. Each other. If they are brought closer to each other, the interaction will increase in magnitude. If they are kept far away from each other, the interaction will decrease. So, Coulomb observed that in case of charges, the change in magnitude varies inversely as the square of the distance. Okay. And the second line says it is directly proportional to product of magnitude of charges. Now, this is also very easily observable. If there are two objects, if they have got more amount of charge, the interaction will be much more vigorous, much more effective than two charges which are smaller than this. And the third part of Coulomb's law is that this interaction, this force, acts along the lines running the two charges. The Coulomb's law has got 3 points. Now, the first 2 points are easily observable. You can say the force between 2 point charges varies inversely as the square of distance between them. That is true. And directly proportional to product of magnitude of charge. This is also simple. The third part, which is acts along the line running the two charges, it's a very important thing to understand. Force, as we know, it's a vector. So whenever we talk about a vector, we need not only the magnitude, we also need the direction in which it is acting. The first two parts of the Coulomb's law gave us that magnitude, that it is directly proportional to product of their magnitudes, and the force is inversely proportional to the square of distance between them. The third part of the Coulomb's law, which says it acts along the line between the two charges, this tells us the direction in which that force is acting. Okay. So from that statement, we can observe that F will become equal to some constant K multiplied by the magnitude of first charge, let's say that is Q1, the magnitude of second charge, let's say that is Q2, divided by the square of distance between them. Let's say that is R. So we have an equation from Coulomb's law, F is equal to K into Q1 into Q2 divided by R square. Now you might be wondering what is K. Now K is just a constant which was taken at that point of time. No one knew what its value would be. After conducting a series of experiments by taking different charges together and observing what is the amount of force between them, and also by varying the distance between them, it was found that the value of K is 9 into 10 to the power 9. Okay, that is the value of K. The value of K, which was found at 9 into 10 to the power 9, was found after conducting a series of experiments. Right? I will also say that the value of K is equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. Now we have 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught, you know what is 4, you know what is pi, you don't know what is epsilon. Epsilon is nothing else but permittivity of free space. Right now we are talking about charges representing free space. Free space means vacuum. When we talk about vacuum, we say that there is nothing else present in there. It means that our system of two charges is independent of anything else happening around it. That is why we talk about free space, that is why we talk about insulated systems. So the value of K is 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught, and the value of epsilon naught in terms of SI is 8.854 into 10 to the power minus 12 Coulomb square per Newton meter square. Okay, these values you can find in our textbooks, but what is there to understand is what is epsilon naught. Epsilon naught is permittivity of free space. Now, whenever we are taking our system to any other surrounding which is not free space, we will have to multiply another term which is epsilon. So it will become 1 by 4 pi epsilon into epsilon naught, where epsilon will now be permittivity of our new medium. So the Coulomb's law will change according to that. Okay. So just now we saw what is Coulomb's law. Coulomb's law gave us a mathematical expression for calculating the force between any two charged particles. It also gave us two very important things. One is the permittivity of free space, and the other thing is the direction of the force which acts between the two charged particles. Okay. We just said that a force is a vector quantity. So whenever it's a vector quantity, we have to take care of the directions. Apart from this force in our equation, that is F is equal to K into Q1 Q2 by R square, there is another quantity which is vector. That quantity is R, the distance between the two charges. If we take into account the vector distance and not just the magnitude of the distance between them, then calculating the force between two charged particles will become very easy for us. Okay. Now, I just advise you, if there is anyone who is not familiar with the concept of vectors, please go back to your textbooks, have a look at what are vectors and how is the vector addition, subtraction, addition, multiplication. There are many different things. There are vector products, there are scalar products. Please have a look at those things, because those concepts will become very handy when you are trying to solve any numericals based on Coulomb's law or based on any other law which you are going to study in this chapter and for the other chapters. Right? Now, we have seen what is electric force. We have established that the force exists between two charged particles which are kept at certain distance from each other. That force is directly proportional to the magnitude of the charges, inversely proportional to the distance between. Right? So along with this force, there is another quantity which we observe, which is called as electric field. Now, electric field is not an independent quantity. It's not an independent phenomenon. The electric field occurs only when there is some electric force. Right? So electric force gives rise to electric field. And electrical force is brought about by charges. So we can in that case say that it's because of the charge that there is some electric field around it. In layman's terms, if we talk about field, then field will refer to any area around any object over which it has some influence. It's the same case with electric field. Electric field, if we want to visualize physically, then it is the area surrounding a charge over which the charge is influential. It has some importance there. It is able to exert some force at that point of time. Okay. If you think about a charge, let's say there is a unit positive charge. Unit positive charge means it's +1 coulomb. Let's say that +1 coulomb charge is placed at some point in free space. Now, if there is any other charge which is placed nearby that 1 coulomb charge, then that charge will experience some force. Let's say our original charge which we placed in free space was Q1. Let's say there is another charge Q2. If I say it's a positive charge, then our Q1 is also positive, Q2 is also positive. If we try to bring Q1 near to Q2, okay, or let's say we keep Q1 as stationary, we try to bring Q2 from some far away place and we try to bring it near to Q1. Then because of same charges, Q2 and Q1 will start repelling each other. You can observe it that, or you can just imagine the scenario that when Q2 was at a very large distance from Q1, then the force of repulsion will be very small. As we try to move Q2 closer and closer to Q1, the force of repulsion starts increasing. This is just a direct consequence of Coulomb's law. Coulomb's law says that the force is inversely proportional to square of distance. So as the distance decreases, the force increases. So as the distance between Q2 and Q1 decreases, the repulsion force exerted by Q1 on Q2 will keep on increasing. Okay. This phenomenon gave rise to people thinking there must be something around Q1 which is causing Q2 to get repelled more and more as it comes closer to Q. That quantity was defined as electric field. If you want a mathematical expression, the electric field can be defined as 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught into Q by R square, where Q is the charge for which we are calculating the electric field. So all that, if you write down the two equations for force and electric field, you will find it out yourself that force is equal to Q multiplied by electric field, where Q is the charge on which we are interested to find what is the force. Okay, so in this case, Q1 was our charge. So electric field at any point at a distance of R from it will be given by 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught into Q1 divided by R square. Now, if there is any other charge Q2 which is placed at that point which is a distance of R from it, then you can say that the force applied on it will be K1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q1 into Q2 by R square, which essentially solves into F is equal to Q into E. Okay. So, electric field is now another quantity associated with a charge. And electric field is very important because we don't need two charges. Calculating force, we need two charges. Calculating electric field is something which is unique to a particular charge. Okay? That is why the study of electric field becomes so important. Right? Now, there are a few things about electric field that you should know. The first thing is that electric field due to one charge is independent of any other charge. If I'm talking about Q1, then the electric field which is present around Q1 will only be because of Q1. It will not be because of any other charge which is being brought into the electric field. Right? The next thing is that electric field, like electric force, it is also a vector quantity. So it will have some direction. For a positive charge, it was found the electric field is diverging away from the charge. If I place a charge Q1 somewhere, then in all the directions diverging away from Q1, I will have the electric field of Q1. If it's a negative charge, then it will be converging on Q. Okay. Next part is the electric field. You see, it is dependent on the distance. So the closer to the charge, the greater will be the strength of electric field. And if we move far away from the charge, the strength of electric field will keep on decreasing. Okay. Now, these are just some of the basic things that we need to understand in electrostats. Okay. So, after the electric field, we will go further into what is the electric field. Right now, we will just discuss what is the electric field because of one charge, what is the electric force between two charges. Now, the same discussion can be extended to a system of charge. If you consider that in free space we have set 5 charges, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and Q5. Okay? Now, each charge will independently exert some force on any other charge. Q1 will exert some force on Q2, Q3, Q4. Q2 will exert a force on Q1, Q3, Q4, Q5. Q5 will exert some force on the other 4 charges and so on. Okay. Now, how to calculate what is the total force on each charge? So, for doing that, you will take one charge at a time. Let's say I have taken charge Q1. I want to find out what is the total force which is being exerted on the charge Q1 by the system of 5 charges. So what I will do is that first I will find out what is the distance between Q1 and Q2, then what is the distance between Q1 and Q3, similarly Q1, Q4, Q1, Q5. I will find out what is the force exerted by Q2 on Q1 while ignoring all the charges. Ignore that Q3, Q4, Q5 are there in the picture. Just think about Q1 and Q2. Find out the force exerted by Q2 on Q1 when they are separated by some distance, let's suppose that is R. Right? Similarly, and that force that we have, that will be a vector form. So write down its vector form. Next, find out the force exerted by Q3 on Q1 when lifting all of the charges. So that again will give us a vector force. Now, at the end of all this, what all you need to do is add all these forces together. Since we are taking them as vectors, we need to add their magnitude as well as direction to find the resultant. The resultant of this vector addition will just tell me what is the total force acting on any one charge because of all of the charges. Okay. Now, then there might be some confusion out of this that different charges behave differently. If Q1 is a positive charge in Q3, Q4, Q5, Q2, they are positive and negative. Let's say Q2 is positive, the rest all are negative. So Q2 will have a repelling effect on Q1, while all other will try to attract Q. So how to take that into account? Now this is where the role of vector addition, the role of multiplying vectors come into picture. Because when we take the distance between two charges as a vector, and we also define the force between them as vector, we are not only given magnitude of the force, we are also taking into account the direction of the force. So obviously, if Q3 is attracting Q1, then the direction of force will be from Q1 towards Q3. It will be directed along Q1 to Q3 because Q3 is trying to attract Q1. Okay. On the same, in the same picture, even try to imagine that Q1 will also be attracting Q3, but we are not interested in that at the beginning. We want to see what is the force acting on Q1, not by Q1. Okay? So the direction of force will change accordingly. And Q1 was our positive charge. So the force between Q1 and Q2 will be repulsive. So when we try to find out the force on Q1 because of Q2, the direction of the force will be towards Q1. Because Q2 is exerting a force to push Q1 away from it. Right? So that is where the vector addition of forces will come into picture, and when we just add them together along with the magnitude as well as direction, we don't need to worry about the what is the nature of the charge. Okay, and also keep in mind that when you are finding out force using Coulomb's law, so while substituting the values for Q1 and Q2, substitute along with their sign. If it is a positive charge, so it is a positive sign, a negative charge, what is the negative sign? Okay. So make sure you take the three things into account: the proper magnitude and the polarity of the charges, and the direction in which you are measuring the distance. And after you have found out the force, just make sure that the direction of the force is also proper. After which you don't need to worry about anything. If you take care of the basics, the rest of it falls into place. Okay. Now, if you want to understand what is the need for studying of electrostats, these are lots of basic things like electric charges, how charges behave, how charges move. So significance of electrostats, significance of charges, electricity, it is not only based on electrostats. Significance of electrostats is mostly when we talk about time-dependent electrolytic phenomenon. Okay? When we bring time into picture and we try to see how does this charge behave when we talk about its movement with respect to time, then only we get a proper idea of what is the importance of electrostats and what is the importance of the study of this electric charge topic. Okay. Now, electric field also. Just now we saw what is the total force acting at a point on a charge because of a system of other charges. Same thing applies to electric field. If you take up charge Q1, it will have an electric field around it. If you take a point A in that particular electric field, and then at that particular point A, there can be a field because of other charges also. So if you want to find out the net field at any point A, then you have to consider the electric field because of individual charges, add them all together using vector law of addition, and what you will get is the resultant electric field. Here again, if you take care of the direction, for positive charges, the electric field is diverging away. For the negative charges, the electric field is converging into the charge. If you take care of the direction here, then once again, you will not have to worry about what is the final resultant direction of the electric field. You put the vector form, you calculate the magnitude and calculate the direction in which the resultant will be pointing to, and you will get the final electric field without any help. Okay? So that vector law of addition applies for both forces and electric field.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Sir, for the excellent lesson. Now, students, if you have any questions on this topic or any particular problem that you're facing, you can ask any question right now. So, Naveen, Divya, Priyanka, Reshma, if you have any questions, and others, if you have any question, you can ask now. Naveen, you have any question? Sir? Hello? Yes, hello. You can go ahead with the question if you have.
Sir, I have a question about Gauss law, sir.
Okay. Gauss law, I think that comes later into this topic. We still need to discuss about electric flux, and then we can move on to Gauss law.
Okay, sir.
So, we'll just cover that in the subsequent classes. I think if you can wait till then everyone will be on the same page and we can take up your questions. Anything else?
Students, if you have any particular topic that you prefer to discuss by sir for the next subsequent classes, you can give that feedback also now. Any feedback or questions? Okay, then thanks a lot once again, Nitesh sir. Thanks a lot, students, for joining the call. We'll meet again for physics 12th standard next week. We'll publish the schedule with you pretty soon. Thanks a lot. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.